been a minute since I put out a video. It's been a minute since I've even done any kind of updates. So yeah, I have got through 25% more than of The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I don't have the book with me right now. It's somewhere in my house. This is turning out to be way cooler than I expected. So I knew this book was getting into this idea that the city of New York is alive in some capacity, and different neighborhoods are represented by different entities that essentially are embodied by what would be otherwise normal people, right? Well, and I also knew that this was a kind of almost like sci-fi alien invasion kind of story in a sense. But I didn't expect to like love this almost from the get-go. I really, really like this. The personification of the different boroughs of New York is so well done. I mean, just there's a whole aspect that's even talked about between two characters that are these different entities, one of Manhattan, one of Brooklyn. And they have names that are fairly similar to those areas. And also there's a character, Bronca, that is for the Bronx. And there's this conversation between Manhattan and Brooklyn when they're on the search for the other entities that really, I think, exemplifies what the story is about. And it's about the fact that each of the boroughs of New York has very distinct cultural aspects about them. Manhattan is, you know, the big city. It's where a lot of people think like that's what New York is, but New York is also, you know, Brooklyn, where it has a lot of the cultural influence of, you know, various different groups of people. Then you have the Bronx, which is, you know, very much the artistic side of New York, the very creative, the very tough and rough and tumble kind of idea of, you know, fighting for, you know, yourself and fighting for, you know, your passions and your creativity. And then you have Staten Island, which is also represented by another character named Island, who is very much that kind of sheltered idea of the fact that, you know, there are some people on Staten Island who they don't want to be a part of New York. They would much rather be a part of them, of their own little area. And it's very much that small town idea of like, everybody that is in New York is a monster. They're so-and-so, they're whatever. And, you know, they have very, very conservative ideas, very conservative aspects, if we want to put it that way. And there's also Queens, which I don't know what the name of that character is as of yet, but that's the other one. And then there's also this idea of, the fact that there's 5 entities and then there's one additional person who is considered the avatar, the person that is like the big powerhouse of this team and is going to help the most in terms of getting rid of this alien entity that is looking to bring these entities together and essentially use them for their own purpose of taking over the entire city. Now, apparently, also in this story, this has happened before. This happened apparently in a place called London. So we follow a character named Sao Paulo, who essentially is, I believe, from Sao Paulo, Brazil, if I'm not mistaken. And he was involved in something that happened in London that was very similar to what is happening in New York City. So obviously, this is something that they've been fighting with for a long time. This is something that has been a constant battle for however long. And there's obviously a group of people that are in the know that every city, the great cities that there are in the world, have these entity aspects about them that need to be protected. And what we learn is that I believe Manny, or the entity of Manhattan, is supposed to be the avatar. He is supposed to be the one, which is funny to me because I think Avatar, I think of Avatar The Last Airbender, and that is actually, in a lot of ways, a very similar connection. I believe Manny is the avatar, where he is the one that is supposed to be the big powerhouse when it comes to destroying this alien entity. What I love about this so far is that you really can see the love that N.K. Jemisin has for the city with the way that she personifies the different boroughs. And they have very distinct personalities. They have very distinct even speech patterns. You know, there's something to be said about how this author really showcases the fact that they know what they're talking about. They know what they're discussing in terms of this city and the different boroughs and what each group basically is like. Like, it's almost as if NK did not live in New York City, this would be something that I would be very hesitant to love, because I'm fairly certain she knows what she's talking about, because I believe she lives in New York City, if I'm not mistaken, or lived there for a long time. If this was written by any other person that didn't live in New York City, didn't ever go there, I would be more hesitant to enjoy this, because I wouldn't know if they were actually actively, you know, writing on something that is accurate in terms of the way that the characters are presented, the way that the boroughs are represented, all that stuff. Now, I do think I understand maybe somewhat where people don't like this series as much, because this is NK's newest duology. This is the newest duology that she came out with The World We Make coming out in, I believe, 2021 or 2020. I can't remember. Oh, actually 2022, so last year. And I think the reason why a lot of people don't like it as much is it plays more on the sci-fi aspect, which we've seen with other series, right? We've seen some of the sci-fi-ness coming in, even with some of her short stories. But I feel like that this one is a little bit more in your face about the sci-fi aspect of it. And I wonder if that was something that maybe people didn't like as much, because she's, you know, she put herself into this role of being a fantasy author for the most part for a very long time. And then to basically create a series that is more sci-fi related might have been a bit of a jump for some of the fantasy lovers, especially those that don't like sci-fi as much. But I think one of the other things I would be interested to know about is the question of, is it because that the writing is so different from a lot of people? Like, was this really like a lot of people's first interaction with N.K. Jemisin when this duology came out, and so they didn't like the writing style? Because the writing feels very similar to everything else that we've read up to this point, and I don't feel like there's anything really different in terms of, you know, the voice, the way that the story is developed. Now, I will say that it does feel like it's a little bit more crisp and clear with this being NK's newest work, but I don't know. I'm curious to know if a lot of the reason why people don't like this series as much as NK's other work is more so if people had this as their very first jump into NK Jemisin, as opposed to starting off with more of her popular work and then finding this later kind of thing, or having started with, you know, the Dream Blood duology, which was her first series, then going to I think it was the 100,000 Kingdoms, and then the 5th season, if I'm not mistaken, and then obviously this one. So I would be curious to know what the chronology of most readers was of N.K. Jemisin, because I feel like a lot of the reason why people maybe don't like this as much is because maybe it was their very first foray into N.K. Because N.K. got really popular, obviously, with the 5th season, with all 3 books being Hugo Award winners. And so I would not be surprised if after that, when this series came out, that there was a lot of new readers that came to her. And so before getting into the 5th season, they started with that series but didn't like it as much, and so then they kind of wrote her off as an author kind of thing. I'm curious to know whether or not that was the way things were, or if it's purely just they didn't like it as much for whatever reason. They didn't like the writing, they didn't like the way that the story was developed. I mean, as far as I'm aware of, I'm like almost a third of the way through the book. I'm enjoying it, but I feel like I'm a little biased now, I will say, because I've enjoyed pretty much everything that NK has written. So I am a little bit hesitant to say that I think, you know, it's, you know, objectively good writing, because I've enjoyed everything I've read so far, and I think it's good writing, but that could be because of my own bias. So I want to make that very clear right now, is that I think that I am a little biased in terms of NK, because she is now one of my more favorite authors. So I feel like my thoughts on her are going to be a little more skewed than somebody who is reading these books a little bit more objectively. For instance, I know there's a lot of people who've been joining me on this reading series where they have had more to say in terms of some of the issues that they had with the series. Not to say that they didn't like N.K. Jemisin, but they're better about, I think, you know, especially talking things objectively. I feel like I'm one of those people where I have a very hard time with being super objective, because if I really like something, I really like it. And unless there's something extremely glaring about something that somebody has written that I need to discuss, then I don't really like say anything bad about it. But yeah, so I'm gonna basically from here go ahead and get started with working through more of The City We Became. Once I get to a good stopping point, when I have more thoughts, I'll let you guys know, but we'll kind of just go from there. Okay, so yesterday I did end up finishing The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I absolutely loved this. It was so good. Gave us a 5 out of 5 stars. This, ooh, I don't know yet whether this series beats the 5th season or not. The first book is very close. Very, very close to being my favorite N.K. Jemisin book so far. So this was so amazing. I loved this. The different voices that were in this story for the different boroughs was so fun, and it just was something that I didn't expect to love this much. I adore Bronca, and like I just love too how each of the boroughs have so many great things about them, but then there are some things about them, for instance, like Brooklyn being more on a homophobic side, and Island being, you know, as restrictive and as like kind of super right-wing kind of thing, you know, that being her bad side, but then seeing that there's so much of her that is just rooted in loneliness, and so much of her being rooted in this perpetuated bigotry that she had received from her parents, and never having been able to really go outside of where she's been, all these things. You know, there's so many different sides to each person that's involved in this story that I really appreciated, and how not every person in here is, you know, the perfect cookie cutter kind of like idea. Every person, just like in real life, is flawed in some ways, and in other ways is really, you know, a good person, you know, in some capacities. Don't know why the dogs are barking, but probably somebody walking outside or something, but please ignore that. Anyway, really, really loved this. Very excited for book 2, because the way that book 1 kind of ended made me feel like that there's kind of this unsettled nature that I am excited to see how that kind of gets brought up in book 2. So let me know what you guys thought about this, because I feel like this is a very underrated series for NK so far. I feel like that this one got a lot of flack for me for probably no reason in reality, but like I said before, it's entirely possible that people who either only read the 5th season and then started this, or people who never really got into her writing before, maybe this was something where it was more of people just don't get it kind of thing, like the girls that get it, the girls that don't kind of thing. So I don't know. I feel like this whole experience of reading NK's work has really been, I don't know why people don't like this, because I really enjoyed it. That's been like the common theme for the most part. I though enjoyed this a lot more than I think I was expecting to, and I already want to go back and reread this one in particular again, just like I did with the 5th season, because I feel like that this especially I would like to annotate and find some really good quotes out of this one to like pull out for everyday kind of like thoughts and things like that. So this is one of those books where this is just something I think I will go back to when I want something, especially that is so rooted and so full of love for something, because this book is oodles and oodles of love for the city of New York. It is love for the good, love for the bad, love for everything in between, and love for this idea of humanity being something more than what it is, you know, portrayed to be in contemporary life, and making it something more powerful in some capacity. So really, really liked this. Let me know what you guys' thoughts were on The City We Became if you read it, what you liked, what you didn't like, and the live show for this is going to be coming up here pretty shortly. By the time this video goes out, it will be coming up this Saturday, which is December 2nd. So it should be 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then we will be moving on to our final book in our N.K. Jemisin read-along, which will be book 2, which is The World We Make, which I cannot believe we are getting ready to read the last book, and the last live show will be in the beginning of 2024. That is insane to me. That is absolutely insane. So anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me in this video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already and you'd like to be and would like to see more content like this, go ahead and hit the button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys.